Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Motor City Mad Mouse Show. Yes, you guessed it with this red and white cap, and I'm wearing blue. And I'm pleased to be joined by my co host, George Eichorn. Welcome to the broadcast, George.
Great to be part of it, Scott. Looking forward to tonight's program on a very somber day for many of us. Yes.
So, yeah, we want to take a moment to recognize the people that passed away on September 11th. And I know you and I are familiar with a hockey player back in Detroit. His name is Garnet H. Bailey, who died in, I believe, a plane crash as well. So, we'll take a quick moment of silence.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, Garnet A. Bailey played for the Detroit Red Wings back, I believe, in the '70s, acquired from the Boston Bruins.
Yeah. Yeah. He was a member of the Red Wings for a short time. Of course, he made most of his uh, career in Boston. Just again, another very unfortunate situation where he was on one of those planes, and unfortunately, we lost him. And there were just almost 3,000 lives, and it's just everybody's got their own story, and then some with what they did and how their loved ones have obviously been taken from us. But yeah, no matter if you're a hockey player, athlete, whatever, I mean, everybody was unfortunately touched in some way.
Yeah, they sure were. I mean, I know I was living in Arizona at the time, and ironically, I traveled on 9/9. And I was supposed to go out 9/10, but I decided to leave Florida a day earlier and just get back because I had to meet with my attorney at the time because I was going through a divorce, and I'm glad I traveled a couple of days earlier to get
Yeah.
back to Arizona, which is where I was living. So, but anyways, let's go ahead and talk about the topics at hand tonight. The Oakland A's will be playing their final games at the Coliseum before leaving town. They played in Oakland from 1968 to 2024. They're charging a lot of money for their finale. This event, obviously, George, is a far cry from what you and I experienced on September 27th, 1999 at Tiger Stadium to farewell against the Kansas City Royals. Bear in mind, the Oakland A's have won 4 World Championships in Oakland.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about this being the final game in Oakland?
Well, it's a sad situation because Oakland has lost their sports identity. I feel bad for that city with the Raiders leaving and the Golden State Warriors building a new place across the bay. And, those teams, like you mentioned, 4 championships, outstanding people. They had a crazy owner, Charles Old Finley, as you remember, that moved the team from Kansas City to Oakland, like you said, back in '68. Reggie Jackson. I mean, Fida Blue. I mean, you go down the list, some incredible names. It is sad, but then again, it's not. We experienced that. We said goodbye to a stadium. These poor fans are saying goodbye to a team, although it's still staying in California, as we know, for a few more years, but it is leaving the city. So our situation was indeed a sad one at Tiger Stadium, but this is even sadder for those fans in Oakland.
Now, let's understand, though, that this situation bears responsibility like it did with the Raiders, but more so with the A's. The A's gave the city of Oakland plenty of opportunities to try to find a way to get a stadium built. And it became a point where when Rob Manfred, the commissioner of baseball, was saying, you know, I don't have a problem with you moving, especially to Vegas. And he's willing because he knew at some point he'd probably get there anyway. So I think the reality of the whole situation is, can you blame the A's for going?
I can't blame them. You're absolutely right, spot on, Scott. I mean, they were given so many opportunities, and I know that other cities have been under pressure to, help teams get new stadiums or acquire new land and all that stuff. But yeah, it is very sad that Oakland and the neighboring communities and the A's and their ownership could not work anything out well, and Major League Baseball as well. But yes, they were given ample opportunities. Tampa Bay comes to mind. Ample opportunities now. On getting a new place for them, the Rays, and I mean, we have the situation in Arizona, with hockey and that, but the A's the A's do belong. Their identity is Oakland. I mean, the Athletics, they move around so much. But I tell you, this one was a long time in Oakland, and that identity
Yeah.
was there. It just did not get the fan support like they deserved on many occasions.
Well, 57 years in that market. Now, bear in mind, they played Billy Ball for Billy Bean, and they found a way to make it work. But all of a sudden, things went south, and they went south very quickly.
They did. They did. You're absolutely right. I mean, where they fell from their championship years, and then, Billy tried to revise it, and you think about all the great players that have gone through that turnstile and those locker rooms, if you will, in Oakland.
Right.
But it's still a very proud franchise. Those records will be preserved. But like I said earlier, it's sad for the fans, especially.
Yeah, and I know the Tampa situation real well. I know the Tampa Bay Rays are going to be building another place adjacent to where they're at, but they're going to develop around the area, which they definitely need to do. I still think Tampa made a mistake staying in St. Pete, and they should have gone to Tampa, but that's not for me to decide. It's what they're trying to do. They got the deal they could get, and no more or less than Miami Marlins, where they ended up going to Miami when they should have gone somewhere else. We'll talk about that topic that much. I just want to focus primarily
Yeah,
on the A's. So
yeah.
yeah, but the A's there were numerous opportunities, and unfortunately, when you have a stadium which is falling apart and attendance with embarrassing figures in the
Oh,
area around
yeah,
three or four
just
thousand, that's
horrible.
bad.
The horrible figures. And you know what? If they are charging more, like you said, for the tickets and that sort of thing, the farewell is going to be very memorable. Some great players are coming back for that, and it should be a lot of fun there, but sad at the same time.
I've always maintained the fact that when you and I were at Tiger Stadium on September 27th, 99, and Ernie Harwell was doing what he was doing, if there was a day that I could freeze in time, it would have been that finale. It
Mhm.
really would have.
You're absolutely right, and I do appreciate the Tigers granting you and I both credentials up in that old third deck press box
Right,
and with our friends there, Jerry Green, Joe Falls, Danny Wald, the list goes on and on. But I mean,
right.
it was just packed, and what a great day, and what a ceremony when the players are running in from center field to their positions. It was just a. I agree with you. I wish I could freeze that day as well. A
All
lot of
right.
fun.
All right. Well, you know what? Now we'll head back to our neck of the woods here. With both of us being from Detroit, were you surprised that Canada amassed only 27 medals? They had 9 gold, 7 silver, and 11 bronze.
I was. I know they had a very large contingent of athletes in Paris, and obviously they have a really good Olympic organizing committee in Canada. I mean, the northern neighbor to the United States, U.S. usually is obviously one, two, or possibly three in medals over the past Olympics, but I was expecting a little bit better from Canada. I mean, and CBC has covered the Olympics so well for them over the years. I mean, it
All right.
is it's a focal point for Canada. They don't have as many teams and as many sports like in America. So yeah, I think the numbers were down, and I'm sure they were down for them too as well.
All right. I just want to let everybody know out there I did write a book, Lessons from the Microphone, Tuning into the Enduring Wisdom of Visionary Leaders. And this book here is available on Amazon and Kindle. So for those of you looking to get a copy about it, that's great. And I think the biggest thing about this thing is George wrote the forward end of the book. We've been working together for the close to 45 years, and George Eichorn and I will be doing this show going forward. So what I've tried to do is pretty much reorganize the show with him and I. We feel that we're able to go out there and do what we need to do to make the Motor City Mad Mouse show on successful on this platform. So I hope everybody can join us and stay with us. But I think the thing that when we talk about old school media, George, versus new school media, this is the way the industry has really changed, and
Oh,
it's just
definitely. I mean, we go back to the days of rip and read, as they said
right.
in the newsroom, the ticker tape, and you and I would have to be dashing in and handing the host some of the great or the new news or new sports stories. And oh yeah, it's changed tremendously now. The electronic age has really changed journalism for sure.
There will be times, folks, that we will be taking topics from my book as well, because we feel that in addition to coming up with sports headlines, we want to make sure that some individuals out there have the opportunity to learn about the industry. So that'll be a situation we'll decide as time goes on how frequent, because we want to make sure we have a good combination of both. All right. Well, with that said, right down the road from Windsor, Canada, Detroit, now the University of Michigan finally announced that head coach Sharon Moore officially signed his contract yesterday, but it didn't take Dusty May long to sign his basketball contract, and he gets $3.75 million a year to leave Florida Atlantic. So, George, why did it take so long for Sharon to sign on the dotted line? I'm sure he's probably earning money off of his previous salary to begin with as the offensive coordinator, but this one seems a little weird. You got a coach essentially not signed, but you knew he was going to be the guy anyways, and that shows you he's a blue amazing blue through and through between, but why did it take so
Yeah,
long for Sharon to get inked up? I don't even know.
this was mind-boggling to me as well. I mean, they introduced him very soon after Harbaugh announced he was going to the Los Angeles Chargers of the NFL, and there was really no uh, extensive interview had to be done because he had proven himself. He was perfect when he substituted for Harbaugh last season during the suspensions and the games that Jim missed. There could have been some legalese going on behind the scenes, something to do with the date of hire or something else going on. I'm not quite sure of the whole situation, but yeah, it didn't take long to sign Dusty, for the Wolverine men basketball team, and they're hoping he does a great job. But I tell you what, this program is going to be going through a little bit of ups and downs. It looks like. I mean, but I still think that Moore is the right player or the right coach for these players at U of M. It's a tough act to follow, of course, with Harbaugh. But all the nonsense that went on behind the scenes last year was really a distraction, but yet they were able to pull it together and win a national title and remain undefeated.
Had the Wolverines not brought in more, the guy that I wanted to see them bring in was Lance Leopold, the head coach out of the University of Kansas. I do believe that Leopold would have left Kansas to go to this job. He did an incredible job with the University of Wisconsin at Whitewater, a Division III school, winning an abundance of championships. So, obviously, I think they made probably the right hire with Sherrone Moore, but Lance Leopold was the name that I was hoping would get it if indeed they went to an outside candidate.
Yeah, yeah. And you told me about Lance several times, and yeah, he probably would have been a good candidate.
So, all right, let's talk about the reactions of Michigan State's 2-0 start. They beat FAU 16-10 at home and Maryland 27-24. But I want to tell you a funny story. Before the Army FAU game, Katrina McCormack, which for whom you know pretty well, and I do, mentioned me. I thought you were going to be in Michigan. Nah, you know what, Katrina? I would have come back to East Lansing to cover the game, but I had the Florida Gators and the Miami Hurricanes in games. Well, I understand. But she's seen me in Michigan on numerous times, whether it was for the Motor City Bowl and when FAU played up there. So, I mean, Michigan State brought in a new coach themselves, and as a result, they're 2-0. I don't want to get too crazy because of the mess that Mel Tucker left behind. But what
Yeah.
are the comments that people are talking about with Michigan State early on in this new coach's tenure?
Yeah, Jonathan Smith has come in and he's lit a fire. I mean, the prognosticators, I mean, all the beat writers and all the columnists here in Detroit from both newspapers all predicted Maryland to win and by at least 10 points. It was quite a shock to most people. They got off to a win, but a slow start in game one. But going on the road and playing the Terrapins in a Big Ten game already, second game of the year, and you're already in conference play. And it was very impressive. I mean, picking up this quarterback and the players that came out of the portal for Jonathan Smith have performed well. I think everybody is really excited right now. They're home this weekend, and our friend George Blaha calling the play-by-play, and he's very excited about the team. I know, and so are the other broadcasters that cover them. But I'm looking forward to seeing them someday in person. I got to see that team, but I think they made a good choice so far. It sounds pretty good in Smith, and it was a mess, that Tucker left behind.
Yeah, I mean, Well, let's stay on the Mel Tucker thing for a moment. Now I understand that he's going out and suing the university. Can you give me a little bit more on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, the situation where he feels that he was dismissed improperly, he wasn't treated fairly, and the university was very swift in their condemnation and in letting him go. I mean, you know, they gave him opportunity for a response. They did not like his response, a certain time frame where he had to respond to the allegations, and then they just gave him the ziggy. There's a lot of money on the line. He lost a ton of money, as we know, in that large contract, which was definitely a eye opener, especially for the African American coaches. I mean, he really, really did get the door swung open for black coaches in college football. There was a lot of attention placed on that hire, and then this well, to me it was despicable what was going on. So I won't say anything more about that. But yeah, he's trying to get leverage as he can, and his lawyers and their team are obviously trying to get money out of it, and saying that he was unjustly treated. I don't pretend to say I have the answer to that one. I think he will get something out of it, but how much I don't know.
Well, I think the biggest thing that you can't go out there and understand that nobody can is this guy can conceivably get blackballed and not hired again, at least as a head coach, at least in college. I'm not saying that other opportunities won't occur in the Canadian Football League or United Football League. I mean, there are other places the man can go. So now his livelihood is at stake for something that, listen, he knows he's got to take responsibility. Michigan State's just not going to show you the door without reason. But as I
Well,
understand,
yeah, yeah, exactly, Scott. I mean, he's in big trouble, right? As far as, like you said, getting an NCAA or an NFL job. I mean, those are very low odds. And but think about the environment that we've been through with Larry Nasser and what happened at Michigan
right.
State University. And to even have somebody take that kind of risk is so hard to believe. Somebody at that level and somebody so looked up to at that university, and the reward, the promise, the satisfaction he got in such a huge contract. So yeah, I mean, blackballed or just ignored. I mean, he's in a tough situation, no question about it. And a married man, and I just, it's a sad situation, and it was very much risky behavior. Let's face that.
Well, you know what? You bring up a really good example with Larry Nasser. Do you think Michigan State really wanted any more turmoil in their athletic department, knowing full well how disastrous that Larry Nasser situation turned out to be?
I mean, absolutely not. I mean, let's face it. Their president was gone. Mark Hollis, the athletic director, was gone. Uh, you know, uh, Coaches, D'Antonio left, had nothing to do with that situation, but they had to get a fresh start, and they were looking for obviously a higher road. And like I said, on the heels of that Nasser, that horrible, horrible doctor and what he did, and the situation with gymnastics is just horrible. And you're right. Yeah, you're trying to turn a page. You're trying to create a better situation,
Right.
and then you have something like this smack you in the face and the head at MSU was just horrible. I know, terrible.
Well, not only from a reputational standpoint, George, but think about it for a minute, okay? How much money they have to pay out. This, I hate to compare the Larry Nasser situation to the Jerry Sandusky situation out at Penn State, and where Joe Paterno ended up getting shown the door before he was ready to leave.
Yeah.
But you talk about a disaster for the university. This just to me happened way too quickly before NASA. So can you blame Michigan State for making a very swift move to show Mel Tucker the door? I don't blame the Spartans for making the move.
No, I don't either. I don't either. That's a very important point you made. And the coming on the heels. I mean, all the anguish and the sadness and the just total humility. Yeah, it just was. tearing at everybody at MSU. I mean, and you're trying to go forward, you're trying to do something new, and I know it's a different sport, but I mean, it just was. It was. You're right. I mean, it was a very costly mistake keeping him, and of course, the university had to pay, as did others, the price. And now the FBI even has a terrible egg on their face for ignoring other allegations against him for years. But
Right.
the point of the matter is, yeah, the Spartans and the Spartan family was trying to turn the other cheek, but go in a better direction with Coach Tucker, and they got blindsided by this guy.
Well, the word is embarrassment is the one I'm thinking about. How embarrassing can this situation be? All right, Mel, get whatever money you think you're going to get. The reality is that's not going to go ahead and replenish, revitalize, there we go, your reputation, because your reputation, there comes a point where somebody has to be accountable for their actions. And whatever he was doing, like you say, was a risky proposition, George. It really
Yeah,
was, especially knowing full well what was going on. And here's a guy that left a job at Colorado, I believe, to come here. Not that Colorado's in much better shape either with Deion Sanders, because he did leave a decent job and he made some mistakes. And unfortunately, he may find himself out of either place, but you never know. Who knows? Maybe if the Sanders thing doesn't work out, they could bring him there, but I wouldn't hold my breath there. But
yeah.
embarrassment for what I'm looking at.
Exactly, and like I said, Michigan State has, of course they've been the as some people would call little sister, but I mean they've had great athletic program, great guys with Big Iman and Tom Izzo and Mark D'Antonio, George Perlas. I mean they've
Right.
had a wonderful program over the years, and to get blindsided and like you said, just despicable behavior by their head coach allegedly. No, they couldn't stand that.
And finally, we're going to talk about the Lions' opening win against the Los Angeles Rams, 26-20. Matthew Stafford against Jared Goff. Now Jared Goff is 2-1 against Stafford. Stafford's lone win occurred in L.A. Jared Goff beat Stafford in the playoffs, and now he's done it on opening night. You were there. Tell us what the environment over at Ford Field was like.
Oh, tremendous, Scott. 60 plus thousand. They all gave out the little lights, the lights so they could control the some of the lighting in the stadium and make it really electric. It was an incredibly loud crowd. They have a decibel meter up on the scoreboard and they keep track, and they're trying to break the record from last year's playoff game when Stafford was here in January. Um, and it was just an incredible night. It really was. I mean, celebrities there, and of course the great Barry Sanders was there, and
Right.
Sunday Night Football crew with
Well, yeah, Mike.
NBC.
Right, Mike Tirico was
Mike
there, I believe.
Tirico, who lives in Ann Arbor. Yeah,
Yep.
he's a Michigan guy now. But yeah, great crowd and just a tremendous effort. I mean, the Lions didn't play their best game. I mean, they're the first to admit it. But my oh my, I mean, when the chips were down and they had to produce a field goal or a touchdown or a winning drive, they certainly came up and answered every challenge late in that game.
Well, keep in mind, Dan Campbell didn't use Jared Goff in the preseason, so you have to wonder how many players he held back in preseason to avoid injury. So it looks like, to me, Jared Goff had to shake away a little bit of that rust. But, he made the plays when he did. But let's not kid yourself, the way the Lions won this game, there were two reasons. One, Jake Bates was able to convert a couple field goals. So now Dan Campbell doesn't have to go for it on every fourth down. But what the Lions rode a Montgomery to the finish line, and I'm talking about David Montgomery, because I'll tell you what,
Yeah.
they ran that ball down their throats, and as a result, by doing what they did, running that ball down their throats, they walked away with a win.
It is, and it's a two-pronged attack. I mean, you got Montgomery and got Gibbs in the backfield. Look at Jamison Williams, how he stepped up to the plate. Amon-Ra St. Brown, he was like, and even Laporta. I mean, they were not as central to that offense as you mentioned, but yeah, picking up Montgomery in that trade from the Bears a couple of seasons ago was just a tremendous move by Campbell and Holmes and getting him. And then, like I said, they've been waiting for JMO to break loose from his cobwebs too, and he had that tremendous long catch for the touchdown, and then other receptions as well. So those two guys, yeah, plus Goff and the kicker, like you said, they put it all together. But that's a good point you brought up with players not playing. A lot of them in the preseason. there's cobwebs, and like you said, there's a little bit of getting used to the NFL grind again for those players.
Well, let's not kid ourselves. Brad Holmes is only one word to describe him. He's a genius.
Yeah,
When's the
yeah, he
last
sure
time the
is.
Lions had a general manager like that? I've always said the worst thing I ever saw happen with the Lions was when they let Jerry Vinicius go on the heels of an NFC championship game. But now, with that, how many of our viewers are actually going to remember that? But they can remember Brad Holmes, who they won 2 playoff games to get to the NFC championship game, and if it weren't for the bad 30 minutes, they could have found themselves playing against the Kansas City Chiefs in Las Vegas. We'll see whether they
Yeah,
make it to Orleans or not.
yeah.
But Brad Holmes is brilliant.
He is, and he's done a tremendous job. And of course, that's his former team, the Rams. And he knew what kind of man and what kind of quarterback Goff was. That was a huge, huge signing for Detroit to make Holmes the general manager, and of course, getting Campbell. But I mean, that connection, like you said, and he's just been tremendous. I mean, he knows talent, he knows how to draft, and certainly free agents as well. Brad Holmes has come out of the Rams family, if you will, the front office to become
Mhm.
very successful so far in Detroit.
Well, I think the thing that people have to understand is they gave Dan Campbell a 6-year contract, and he's in year number 4. So obviously, the Sheila Hamp is, she doesn't use her regular name for
Yeah,
it. I believe Sheila Hamp, as I understand,
yeah,
made a bold move by going out there and giving him a 6-year deal. Chris Spielman done a great job behind the scenes building that culture. And of course, now Barry Sanders and Calvin Johnson are serving as ambassadors. So for the first time in a long, long time with the Lions, what you're seeing a culture and a much happier family knowing that they're rallying around this team as well.
that's a great point. And that is exactly what she wanted to do is change that culture at 222 Republic Drive in Allen Park, the team headquarters, because no more long faces, no more negativity, whether it was in the corridors or the locker room or whatever.
Right.
They created, and hiring Ron Wood too as president. Let's not overlook that. He's been a Ford family friend for many, many years, but he's done a very good job. He's done a good job of controlling the business side of that of organization. But you're right. Sheila has said no. We're changing the culture here, and it started with Campbell, and you said Holmes and Wood, and so far so good.
Well, when the Lions started 1-6 that one year, and people were getting nervous
Oh
about
yeah,
Campbell's job, and then he took that season and turned it around, then you began to see Campbell's vision and also began to see Brad Holmes' move make sense. So ironically, they hired Campbell before they brought in Holmes, but yet they knew that we're going to make you guys work together. You're going to have to figure it out. And it seems like that relationship between coach and general manager has worked out quite nicely.
yes, and you're right. The 2022 season, they started terrible and then they finished 9-8. As you know, they defeated the Green Bay Packers in the last game
Right.
of the season. They missed the playoffs. Detroit missed the wild card. But what a turnaround that was to again finish over 500, and then last year, of course, blowing everybody away at 12-5. But yeah, there is a vision. There is this team takes on the persona of Holmes and Campbell, and the grit and grime, and we had the Pistons using that term a lot, and it worked for the Pistons for several championship years. But I mean, here we got the Lions, who are really, really taking on, like you said, the persona of the team management and the coach.
Well, what was interesting about that particular year is number one, the Lions didn't have a national television game all year. Item
Yeah,
number one.
yeah,
Item number two, okay, they were already knocked out of the playoffs, and Dan Campbell says, "We don't care. We want to just take it to Green Bay and knock them out with us." So, it's
oh,
like you're looking for something to play for, so they're taking them with us, and as a
yeah,
result, they did, and that's where you end up dealing with a lot of respect. Well, we're out, no big deal. Well, it was a big deal
it
because
was.
what turns out is you have the carryover effect where number one, you end up getting national television games, which they didn't have until the final one. And of course, what happens? They end up on NBC against Kansas City. So you have Tirico doing one and then the other one.
I
I mean, that
remember.
So
I remember you and I had another program. We're talking about that. And remember, there were like 3 or 4 options for NBC for that final game. And you stood your ground. I give you credit, Scott. You said, no, it's going to
yeah,
be Detroit and Green Bay. And I was trying to tell you, no, the Giants or no, Washington or whatever. And here it was. Like you said, the final game, the final choice for NBC
right.
for that 17th week of the season, Detroit at Green Bay. And you're absolutely right. They knocked the Packers out of the running. And it,
Well,
yeah,
in the eyes of Chris Berman, okay, here's the situation. He called him the NFC Norris, which I think was great. That's one of his best lines ever, Berman. But the amazing part about the whole thing is when Mike Tirico went ahead and said, well, the Lions would have lost that game if Travis Kelsey, I think, was in the game. They were shorthanded. Yeah, okay, Mike. I so don't agree with you on that. But now Mike Tirico has gotten a steady dose of Detroit Lion football. Every time they play in Detroit, at least the man gets to sleep in his old own
yeah,
bed. So if I ever see Mike somewhere down the road, I'll say, "Well, Mike, you know what? I guess the Lions made you bite your tongue a little bit, but I guess if he's entitled to his opinion that if they were
yeah,
full-handed, but
yeah,
it's safe to say he gained respect for him, and he got to see him an awful lot to realize that this team isn't no ordinary team. They're playing much better, more organized, and they're trying to put the pieces together. Am I going to
yeah.
anoint them Super Bowl champs? No, no way. I
No,
mean,
but but it is ironic, like you said. Yeah, they went to Kansas City, won the opener last year with Tirico in the booth. Now this year they open up not on Thursday, but on Sunday night, Tirico's first Sunday night game, and they beat the Rams. So yeah, I mean, it's just it is an incredible challenge, but it's a team that really has so much going for it. So many veterans and Campbell and management. But yeah, Tirico, he he had that asterisk by Detroit's win last year in Kansas City and come back to haunt him for sure in Michigan.
well, it has, but I think he's probably tempered a little bit more with it because now he sees that they're a much different team. I don't see the only way I could even try to give Mike the benefit of the doubt is okay, you're only coming off the Green Bay game and you haven't seen them a lot until that game when they surprised the daylights out of everybody. So he wasn't sure how good they really were, and then he had to find out later. Yeah, all right, well,
Yeah,
when you're a broadcaster, you're not going to sit here and say, "No, I made a mistake." No, a lot of us aren't going to admit a mistake. A lot of us want to think that hey, we believed it because we said it at the time. But
yeah,
that's
yeah.
not that he was going to repeat that down the road. And let's face the reality. Mike Tirico is one of the best broadcasters in the business. He really,
Oh
really
yeah,
is.
yeah. I
But
have a lot of respect for Mike. Mike has done so much. He's worked his way from ESPN and was riding, a great streak at ESPN, and then NBC made the move to make him the face of NBC Sports and the Olympics and NFL, and it's worked out great. Mike's a great guy, hard worker, and we're glad to have him living in Michigan here too.
many years ago, I did have an opportunity to meet Mike Tirico, one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. He told me he was in Ann Arbor, and we talked a little bit. When you obviously go to the Super Bowl and some of the events that I've traveled throughout the years, can meet a boatload of people. But our paths did cross, and Mike was one of the unbelievable people. Or as I did with Stuart Scott many years ago as well. Unfortunately, Stuart Scott passed away due to cancer early on. But here we are, the Motor City Madmouth. George Eichorn
Yeah,
and I are your permanent host on this show going forward. And of course, we bring 45 years. There's no better opportunity for us to take over the show than on September 11th. So
yeah.
once again, we want to acknowledge everybody that passed away, and it's a tough day in American history. But there's no way you cannot recognize what took place that day. Can't My wife Candy and I had an opportunity to go to that memorial out in New York, and it was unbelievable. I mean, you just see it, and it gives you chills down your spine. If you've never been to the 9/11 Memorial in New York City, folks, you got to get there. So, meanwhile, this does conclude this edition of the Motor City Madmouth Show. So, on behalf of George Roycord, my name is Scott Morgan, the Motor City Madmouth, and we will see you next Wednesday night. Take care, everybody, and looking forward to seeing y'all again. Have a good night, everybody. Bye now.
Right.